Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar, a case study, how insolvency practitioners can use software to drive efficiency and increase profits in association with Virtual Cabinet. I'm Alison Morgan. Some of you may know me here from the restructuring and insolvency community at ICAW, and I'll be your facilitator for today's session. So our speakers today are David Owen from Virtual Cabinet, Ted Wetton from Gibson Booth, and Greg Clough from Alverez and Marsal. And David's going to start us now. Thank you.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. The subject of today's webinar is to talk about using technology to drive efficiency and profit, which reminded me of a quote from Bill Gates, where he said, "The first rule of any technology used in a business is that automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency. The second is that automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency." And whilst that's potentially a double-edged sword to start off the webinar, the reason I like it is it got me thinking about how we could add value to your working practice for all the members that are on the call today. So rather than, as a vendor, me just doing a presentation for the next 40 minutes or so, I sought out a couple of our own clients that are quite different in their own ways, but equally effective in driving efficiencies in their respective business. So what we're going to do today is do a sort of an interview-style process where we're going to ask Ted and Greg about their challenges they faced and how they overcame those with technology. Whilst I'll be driving the questions, it would be great, as was mentioned earlier, that if you do have any questions, feel free to ask them as we're going through. If relevant, if we can catch them at the time, I'll maybe thread them into the conversation live for Ted or Greg, but if not, then we'll definitely read them out at the end during the Q&A. And whilst they've had a fleeting introduction, I think given the audience, I was just checking earlier, is made up of insolvency firms of all different sizes, it might be worth introducing our panel speakers today in a bit more detail. So, morning, Greg.
Good afternoon.
Or good afternoon, even. Afternoon, Greg. Maybe if you could just give us a bit of an introduction about your job at Alverez and what you do there.
Okay, so I have the not very snappy title of Head of IT for the relatively new Insolvency and Regional Restructuring Business Unit in Alverez and Marsal Europe, LLP. Being an American firm, they treat Europe as really everything outside the US. I'm an insolvency practitioner, but I switched to a system and compliance role in one of the Big Four in 1997. A&M are a global firm, and they were founded in the US in the early 80s, and we offer operational and financial performance improvement and turnaround management solutions. I joined A&M in 2017, right at the beginning of an exciting new journey where four partners came across from a big firm and set up a formal insolvency department with a view to spreading. And we have now established ourselves in London. We've opened offices in Birmingham, Leeds, and Manchester, and also offshore in Cayman and Hong Kong. So since 2017, excluding performance improvement, we've recruited just over 100, mainly ex-Big Four staff. As a role of what I do, it's a bit like Groundhog Day, as I've been setting up the IPS system, the Insolvency Practitioner System, and associated applications and processes, which is what I did in 1997 in another firm. But I've been able to bring what I've learned and also start with new technologies. So we have our systems hosted in a private cloud. We've been paperless from day one and made full use of Turnkeys portal. We're lucky because starting in 2017, we've got no legacy cases. So we were fully able to embrace the portal from then. We only send one piece of paper correspondence out at the beginning of an engagement, and everything else is done online without paper unless creditors ask for paper specifically. We've got staff from all of the Big Four and experience from mid-tier and some Antipodean firms as well. And so we've been able to pool best practice and decide what worked well and how we wanted to work differently. And in this context, I think the best thing that we've been able to do is take the time to link our time filing, document naming and policies and procedures all under SIT9 headings, but we'll come to more of that later.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Greg. As you said, it'd be really interesting to give an insight into some of those indexing routines that you've gone through. I know you've spent a lot of time on those, getting those right, Alverez. So I think over to Ted. He has a slightly different approach to how he's gone paperless over the years. But before we get into that, Ted, could you just give us a bit more information about Gibson Booth and what you do there?
It's Ted Wetton. Good afternoon. I'm Managing Director of Gibson Booth. I set up the insolvency wing in 1992. You can work out the years yourself regarding that. I'm a chartered accountant and a licensed insolvency practitioner. I have 12 staff. All my management staff are either qualified insolvency practitioners or have got the certificate of proficiency. We deal with large jobs up to fees of $500,000. That's a large fee for us, but we also deal with a lot smaller jobs. And one of the things we have to do is be very efficient so that either we can pay a dividend or we don't have as big a write-off in fees. In 2001, we went paperless with a Dutch firm. Then after 12 years, it became quite expensive. We had to have a separate file server, etc., etc. So I looked around the market and we had 5 people visitors. And the one that shone, where this was in a meeting with 6 of my senior staff, and the ones we couldn't trip up, and it did everything that we wanted, was virtual cabinet. And so we then, after 12 years with the previous firm, then we installed virtual cabinet, which was a very easy process. We have approximately 160 live cases, and virtual cabinet allows us to work remotely. So basically, that is what we do. I am not an IT bod. I just know what I want, and I go out and I get it. Then I expect IT people to put it in, and then to come and let my staff know how to use it in the most proficient manner.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Ted. As Walt Disney once said, less of the thinking and more of the doing, hey? So I think it's interesting to know that for our audience that you are also chairman of the IPS user group. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm chairman of the IPS user group, and I'm currently president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, Sheffield and District.
Okay. And what's the main purpose of the IPS user group?
The IPS user group is that we invite IPS to attend. So it's an independent group. We meet every year. This year was the first time we had it at the Institute. We had approximately 180 people attend, and that is the day when we can go through with Turnkey, and they show us what their current system is, what they're looking at, and then they show us better ways of using their technology. It's a very useful day out.
Fantastic. So, I mean, that kind of leads very nicely into today, really, because today is all about the collaboration of our clients coming together and sharing insights into what's helped them as a business. If I move on to the next slide, what's interesting is a lot of the businesses that I go and see, a lot of them are already trying to go on that journey from a paper-based office to a paperless office. But there's still a huge amount of paper around in their offices and in storage, and some quite interesting statistics saying that 70% of businesses would fail within 3 weeks if they had a catastrophic loss of paper. So I think it would be really interesting just to get some demographics today from our audience if the next thing we did is just put a poll up in terms of asking a question there around how paperless you consider your business to be. So if I can invite you all now, you should hopefully be seeing the screen where you can actually fill in what stage you think your business is in terms of how paperless you actually are. Just whilst we're doing that, just whilst you're filling that in, if I could just put the question to Ted and Greg, what was, from a high level, the actual push to get a document management system in the first place?
In 2001, we had a visit from the Institute, and there were files, etc., that they couldn't find, and things like that. They were all found, but one of the things it made me think was it would be better if we had some better sort of system. That's when I took an exercise to work out how long it took to go get a piece of paper off a file, and I actually went down to basics, where I sent a member of staff up into the storage room and worked out how long it took them to take the file out of the cabinet, undo the file, take the piece of paper out, bring it to me, then work out how you have to refile it and make sure it goes back on the right file, etc. So all this was becoming annoying, and I've always enjoyed technology, and that's when I looked round for a system of document storage.
And I think we've been lucky because not many people get the chance to just set up a practice sort of midway through your career. So we've been paperless in approach from day one, although initially we were using network drives without a document management system. We took the opportunity, because we knew we were going to grow, or hoped that we were going to grow, to send all our posts to one external PO box. And then we have an external firm who pick that up, scan it, and they process it. So we keep them informed of what engagements we have and the creditor or contact list on those jobs, and they will match the incoming post to those, so that arrives directly into Virtual Cabinet and, where possible, is filed, and where not, appears in an in-tray. The other key driver for us was that, being paperless, people still like to be able to see a file, and conscious of where I'm sat, which is in the Institute, our regulators like to come in and see our files, and that's sometimes a challenge with paperless files. So one of the things that I was challenged with was making sure that we could construct, albeit a PDF version, but of an actual file that runs with tabs, much like a conventional old-style paper file would. And so it's taken us some thought and work with both Turnkey and Virtual Cabinet to get there, but we're there, and it's proved very effective.
Fantastic, thank you both. So just to go through some of those results, it seems that there's a fairly interesting mix. Obviously, as you can see on the screen, about 50% of you would say that you're halfway to becoming paperless. There is a good 14%, 100%, which is fantastic. Well done to all of you that have achieved that. And almost 30% saying not at all. So it looks like there's a wide range of people on their journey to becoming digital. So maybe that gives us a fantastic opportunity to talk about the different stages of which, we can help you go on that paperless journey. One of the first things is fascinating for me, especially when you're going to cities with quite expensive rental, is almost 50 to 70% of commercial office space is just full up of paperwork, and most of that is actually duplicated. So again, Greg, I know recently that you had some office moves, so...
Yeah, so we've been paperless from inception, but we have just moved to new offices in London, and the other departments were asked to shed paper in the move and try and organise themselves such that they didn't need cupboards in the new building, and that was very easy for us because we didn't have any paper. And as we've established our regional and offshore offices, it's meant that they can be really comfortable open spaces, because we're not taken up with cabinets of paper all around the place.
And Ted, I know that you have some really good tips in terms of actually scanning the paperwork in. What have you done within your firm?
Well, in our firm, since we went paperless, we managed to virtually empty the equivalent of a terraced house of paper, and that is now rented out. So that saved us an enormous cost. One of the major things which is the time it takes to retrieve and see a document. The average time is approximately 5 or 6 seconds, and that is one of the biggest things that you've got. We found going paperless was quite easy. We just set a date, and we said that from that date all filing would be paperless, and then we kept the old files. Then we came to doing the first review on the file, and the staff looked through the papers on that file to see what they'd like to continue going on that file, and they actually scanned some of the documents in. So we went through a period of having paper files and being paperless. But one thing I didn't do, and that was to bring in some staff to scan all the files on, because that would have taken a lot of time, but also it's the quality of the person putting those files on. So that's how we did it. When we knew we were going paperless, we got rid of paper, stapling paper, and then we got clips, so all our paper is clipped so that when you put it through the scanner. And the way that we do it is that we all have it's quite simple to do when you install it all, because basically most of you will have photocopiers that will have a scanner on top. Most of those will have a screen where you can put all the names of all your staff, so if someone scans in, it goes to that person. We then advanced to putting on everyone's desk a Fujitsu FI 7160, which is a very small scanner, multi-sheet feed scanner. It does both sides, and so every member of staff has got one of those. And then we don't actually scan the posting in the morning. If we're in the office and the post is there, that goes to the administrator dealing with the case. However, one of the things which is important for us is that we have people working from home, and their mail will be scanned in and sent directly to their in-tray. So long term, it has saved us space, but the major one is the cost of time to find papers on the file. The other one is, it is one big bin. You can't lose a document once you've scanned it in, and from the viewpoint of compliance, there are no lost documents.
Fantastic. So I think that kind of demonstrates from two different perspectives. I get asked this a lot when I go and see firms of how do I go paperless, how do I scan the document, how do I deal with the post. There is a number of different ways, and when you're reviewing your document management system, you just need to look at how flexible the system is and talk to the respective company about the consultancy they can provide, because you really do lean on them to help you. They've seen it all before, and my advice is that we can fit within your current processes so that you're not trying to shoehorn an application in. You want something that's flexible and actually wraps around your processes so that staff adoption is very, very easy. So that kind of leads us on quite nicely to maybe another poll. Again, we've talked about what part of the journey that you were on, but if you were reviewing your business processes at the moment, it would be interesting to see what your current biggest pain points are in your business at the moment, and then maybe we can hone in on that as we go through the rest of the questions. Just so whilst we're going through those questions, you spoke earlier, Ted, about the biggest thing being able to find your documents back quickly. How do your staff use a document management system? What are the sorts of things that you need to be able to retrieve very, very quickly? Is this because of an audit perspective, or is this investigative work?
The normal files, basically, it's so that we can retrieve documents. We've got someone on the phone, or we've got an email from someone and it's regarding something, then we can look at the document within 4 seconds. It's very easy to find, and that is one of the main things that is one of the great benefits.
Okay, great. So just looking at the results coming through, I've just published them. It's quite an interesting split. So it would appear that the storage of paper is a big one. Difficulty finding documents quickly seems to be in the lead at the moment, but very closely followed by email management, which is very much a worthwhile talking point, because it seems to be, when I go and see firms, that the majority of them are using Outlook. Documents that are correspondence that should be on the file aren't necessarily reaching the file, or they're being duplicated, and something that we really work to and focus on to help when we go about going paperless. Greg, what were the sort of challenges that you faced with email management?
Well, before Virtual Cabinet, as you say, a lot of emails often don't find their way to the file, or not promptly, which means the rest of the team don't know that they exist, so they can't be searched. Trying to save down onto the network, which is what we still do in our overseas offices, is clunky at best. So having the ability to have your email and your other documents just as documents in one place is absolutely fantastic. The other thing there, I think it's worth, Ted mentioned the multifunction device scanners and such like, we have the external scanning as well. They all have OCR, or optical character recognition features, and we've made sure that we've got that turned on for anything, because within Virtual Cabinet you can either just search on document names, or where you can read it, you can search on document content, and that can be really powerful, particularly if something's gone astray or been filed on the wrong case or something. If you've got the content, as Ted says, it only takes seconds to locate things.
Okay, and I think there was two very different approaches to filing across the two different firms. One of the answers was about how to find documents back quickly, but I think it's important that from a consultative perspective, that when we go and work with firms, we work out their filing structure with them. Again, we give them a lot of experience that we've gleaned and working in your particular vertical market to help you with that. But fairly briefly, because I know it's a reasonably detailed subject, could you give a quick overview, Greg, of what you've done with Virtual Cabinet to try and help with the searching?
Yeah, so I suppose slightly less from searching, but from being able to construct a file. We have a two-tier SIP9 structure, which I think will be common to many. So you've got your SIP9 headings and then the detailed SIP9 under that. In practice, when it comes to file under that, people want more headings. So we give the ability for people to have one more heading at a case level, so they're not predefined. We also, when we first came to Virtual Cabinet, it integrated a little with IPS, and you get your engagement names and also the creditor, debtor, employee codes and names to file against. But it was quite easy to request also chart of accounts, which is helpful, particularly where people have maybe different properties or whatever. You can name those in the chart of accounts, and then you can index those as it is in a Virtual Cabinet. And so between those indexes, we have two SIP9 headings, the case that you're on, a case-specific heading if you need it, and the chart of accounts and the contact. It gives you multiple ways of finding what you want.
Okay, brilliant. And Ted, how did you approach the filing?
Right, we didn't go into it in such detail. One thing, because we've been paperless for such a long time, is what you've got to remember is that when you scan a document in, you put it into one bin. That one bin means you can find anything, and you could do search ways to find that document if you wanted. However, what we did was, we've been with Turnkeys since 1992, and they had the index of 1 to 25, with approximately 8 to 10 indexes inside each section. So that's what we went with, and we haven't changed that. So that basically our paper files were just the same as the files in Virtual Cabinet. So we just use the turnkey 1 to 25, then we put it into subsections. I don't always agree that we should put into subsections because you should always be able to find it. But to me, I don't actually believe that you need to break it up into minute detail, because it is one big bin and you can find any document. So we just use a turnkey 1 to 25. We segregate each section into about 10 headings. We've obviously got the client name on it, etc., etc. So that's how we file it, and it's worked very well.
Great, and I think it's some really useful insight. And again, I think it just goes to reinforce the fact that a good document management system, if you're looking for one, will be very flexible in its searching for the users. So what you want to do is get the filing structure at the beginning right, and that can be as simple or as granular as you want to suit the organization, but you shouldn't get tempted into having something that's familiar to what we would describe as a Windows folder structure, because that has its own inherent problems and it's very centric to the actual folder that you're in. A good document management system will allow you to do searching in a number of different ways, filtering, content searching, and also a visual search. And maybe later on, if we get time, I can quickly show you that on the system so you can visualize what that actually looks like. So for you, Ted, I was just wondering, in the current economic climate, have you seen an increase in insolvency cases?
Yes, we've had a quiet 3 years, and then all of a sudden something happened in April, and the insolvency has just taken off. When we were quiet we weren't quiet, but we were quieter than we normally were. But that's when we actually did spend quite a lot of time improving our computer systems, etc., to make us more efficient. But we have seen a substantial increase in work from April.
And yourself, Greg?
Well, happily, year on year, being quite new, we started with no jobs, so we're busier than when we started. And what we've found is that, particularly with London and the offshore areas, that we're finding less familiar sources of work coming from our US arm of A&M, and that has kept us recruiting ahead of, I think, what we planned. Our regional offices are less than a year old at the moment, and we've got cases now come in through each of those offices, and I think we anticipate that the economic climate will probably mean that we're going to get busier there too. But at the moment, we can't complain about lack of work.
Fantastic, that's great news. So obviously as the economy changes, you're getting busier and busier at the moment. You're both reiterating the fact that you're using systems to help drive efficiency there. We've talked a lot about just actually removing the paper files and going digital, but there seems to be a lot of change in the market in terms of what that actually looks like for your third-party end users. And one of the sort of the key changes that I'm seeing at the moment is use of portals, and there seems to be a number of different flavours of portals. But to both of you, I suppose, Greg first, have you as a firm started to engage any sort of portal?
Well, we were very lucky in terms of timing, so we started off in April 2017 just as the rules that completely facilitate, or really not facilitate, but push towards the use of portals. So we've tried to embrace Turnkeys portal, absolutely, and so we only send out one piece of paper at the beginning to each stakeholder, and then we push them towards the portal, and we found that to be very efficient for us and cost-effective for our clients. We've focused very much on pushing that portal to its limits, and we've used it for voting, bringing claims and proofs and proxies, and given that we didn't start little, so our first job was Toys R Us, which wasn't the one I personally would have chosen to test our new systems on, but we were not 20 people at the time we took that job, and we couldn't have managed the taking in of the claims, managing all the paper and doing the voting with 20 people had it not been for the fact that all came through the portal. So although we had a physical meeting, all the paperwork and claims came in online, and that's been really fantastic. And we find that the creditors engage with it pretty well. And then there's the virtual cabinet portal, which has I think they coexist. Some people seem to think that they were confusing, but I think they coexist quite well in that Turnkeys portal is very much for dealing with your creditors and your stakeholders, and the virtual cabinet portal facilitates secure communication directly one-to-one, so for more like engagement letters or your solicitors or other people where you don't want stuff going by email.
Great. And yourself, Ted, have you started using a portal at all?
Well, the Turnkey portal is excellent. Creditors, we can put reports on there, etc., and they can put their claims on, and that saves a lot of time. And especially if you're not going to pay a dividend, you don't really have to look at it that much. But it takes out a lot of the proofs of debt, etc., coming into the office. That is one portal, and that does work very well. The portal or virtual cabinet we use now because of GDPR, and so on certain cases, etc., we use the portal. It's very simple to use. When you set it up and you've got a new person, the instructions go out to them. It's very easy for them to set up, and then they can reply on the portal. Also, we can send documents to them for them to sign, electronic signature on the virtual cabinet one, so that's saving taxis, running round, going out at 4 o'clock at night to get a signature, etc., etc. So the automated signature is excellent, but the biggest one is the fact that through the portal you have security, and you haven't to be as scared about what you put in as if you were sending an email, although we are still a little bit careful. But the virtual cabinet portal is simple to use, integrated into the virtual cabinet software at no extra cost, which is important in the north of England. So it is excellent. Electronic signature is very important. That saves an awful lot of time. And as things are developing, and there's been a recent legal case to say that deeds, etc., etc., can be signed electronically, it will increase the use of it. Some solicitors are a bit wary of using it, smaller firms, etc. But as time goes on and there's more legal cases, it will be something which we're going to use more and more.
Definitely, I definitely think the landscape of electronic signatures is changing very rapidly with the education of what's happening there in the marketplace. They've actually been around for a long time, and again, if you're looking for something that does digital signatures, make sure that they have a forensic audit trail. They don't just have to have what looks like a squiggle on a piece of paper. You need to actually show the audit pre-signature, post-signature, and something that complies with the UK and UK Digital Signatures Act and the EU Directive for Digital Signatures. So those are a couple of things to look out for. Just to wrap the interview up. certainly with both of you using IPS, you looked for a best-of-breed document management system that integrated with IPS. So I was just wondering, in what other areas has your document management and case management system helped with your existing systems? Greg, maybe you first.
Well, we've just taken a VC-enabled version of Turnkeys transaction processing system, which is fantastic. So that means that all the supporting documents for our transactions sit in Virtual Cabinet and are linked through to the automatic approval process. We can show evidence of things, so we can put links into the IPS diaries and into the notes and contacts on IPS to documents that are in Virtual Cabinet. They're immediately available. When you merge a document, you get a link to the Virtual Cabinet version of it put onto the creditor that you've written to, so it's very easy to find documents from within IPS as well. We've used the Virtual Cabinet task to provide an approval process for approving documents to be posted through the post or directly to the Turnkey portal, so we know when they're approved. And for incoming post, we, as I said at the very beginning, we trigger IPS tasks, which means that staff see upcoming important things in their diaries along with incoming post prompted there as well. And we've mentioned the IPS user group. We had an inaugural IPS Virtual Cabinet user group just in the late summer, and one of the best things for me that came out of that was one of the other firms introduced us to Postworks, which is an online process for sending posts. So being paperless, when we got to circulars and having to send out circulars, it was a bit of a shock to everyone to actually have to deal with paper. For large amounts, you have to outsource it. For smaller amounts, you're back to stuffing envelopes. And really, there's not time to go into Postworks a lot here, but that's just meant you just upload your PDF of the document onto their site, and they send it for less than it costs to frank the letter. So now, with the last few months, we are completely paperless, as in we don't have any paper at all because we don't even have the need to print it, which is fantastic.
Great, that's excellent. So in terms of actually going towards a digital office, I think it brings some additional benefits, not only to improving efficiencies and profitability within your firm, but actually it promotes ease of access to your files. Long gone are the days where you're carrying great big file cases under your arms onto a train and having to lug those around. So Ted, have you within your firm found any additional benefit to going paperless for your staff?
One of the major benefits of going paperless for our staff is for myself, I can be anywhere and I can get into all my files and I can see all the paper files, etc., etc. But one of the other ones is that with my staff, we've come to more working with people working from home. And people can work from home as if they were in the office. They've got the paper files there. In the office, we have 3 screens. We have the main screen that we're working on. We have Virtual Cabinet on one screen, and we have emails on the other. When staff are at home, they have 2 screens. They'll have Virtual Cabinet on one, and then they're working on another. But one of the big benefits of it is that the staff, you can be a lot more... If, say, someone is going to see the doctors, I know this is quite basic, but if someone's going to see the doctors at 12 o'clock, rather than taking half a day off, etc., they will work from home, either on a laptop, or some of our staff have a full computer box, and they can work from home, and it is just as though they were in the office. But what we've done is develop that over the last 15 months, where we've had people at home and then we've practiced what it is that holds them up. But just like Greg, we're just incorporating Postworks. And one of the big things which they couldn't do when they were working from home, well, it meant that they had to send the letter to the office, then someone had to go get the office from the printer, etc., put it in an envelope and post it. But the benefit with Postworks is that they can now send it from home or wherever anyone's working. They can send it to Postworks, and if it's with Postworks before 12 o'clock, it's guaranteed delivery the following day. There's no need to envelope it. We haven't got rid of our franking machine yet, but it's trying to make it so that staff can literally work on their own, and that is one of the last things, is the actual posting things out, which is excellent.
Fantastic. So that's something that's improved your staff's working life, being a bit more flexible from home. I think that drive towards digital actually demonstrates that you can then start to integrate other applications to complement your core single source of truth that you might have with your case management system and your document management system. So I'm conscious of time. I want to leave some space for Q&A at the end. So I think what we'll do now is we've talked quite a lot around the theory of some of the practices that both Ted and Greg have taken today. But it's really nice to sometimes just be able to visualize some of the things that you could actually take to back with you into your practice. So what I'm going to do very quickly is I'm just going to share my screen and maybe just give you a couple of glimpses of the sorts of things that Greg and Ted are currently doing at the moment with IPS and virtual cabinets. So just bear with me. So hopefully what you should be seeing now is Virtual Cabinet on your screen. This is what it would look like if you just logged on to Virtual Cabinet. And you can kind of use this in two different ways. If you're using IPS, you can actually drive the case file from the IPS user interface itself. If you're not using IPS, then you can actually use Virtual Cabinet as a standalone document management system. But if I just go through to the in-tray, so there's a concept of an in-tray in Virtual Cabinet. This is exactly like having a plastic in-tray on your desk. So we're assuming here that some scanning has been done. You're sitting within your in-tray. As you can see, it's nice and visual. You have a paper view here that you can very quickly just skip between documents as if it was printed off on your desk. And to file them away, it's very much just a drag and drop process. So you can literally just drag the document onto the filing cabinet, and then from there, there's some really nice, neat integration to IPS itself. So Ted mentioned earlier that he has his listing of the IPS numbers here, so you can see you've got secure creditors, preferential creditors, pre-appointment correspondence, and so on. And this can all be customized to suit you, as we mentioned earlier. So if I just said this was something to do with secure creditors, the next thing it says to me here is, well, what type of document are you dealing with? So if I said utilities, it goes and does the lookup within IPS. So you can see that I've got a list of all the cases here, which is live in Virtual Cabinet from the integration to IPS, and then based on picking the particular case, it then finds all the contacts that it's related to. So in this case, all the creditors. So if I just selected Enfield Council, what that's actually doing is giving the whole firm a centralized filing convention, so everyone is filing away in the same process. And of course that builds to some very nice logic as we are going to do the searching later on. So I've laboured on that a little bit to show you the process, but as you can see, it's just a drag and drop, just takes a couple of seconds to file the document away. So that was actually filing something that was a hard copy or a scan, but earlier in the polls, a lot of people were interested in how a document management system can help in terms of email filing. So what we do is we have a direct add-in to Outlook. So as you can see, I've got my Outlook open here, and there's a couple of new columns. So there's a tick box or a red color code, and that is describing to you as a user and visually showing you that this email is filed to Virtual Cabinet. So how does that actually happen? So if I open up a brand new email, and I'm just going to call this subject ICAW. You can see over in the right-hand corner there, I have a very clear Virtual Cabinet add-in. So that's always there for the user to prompt them. And by using that, if you're filing a bit of post away, so it's actually got a direct link again into IPS. So you can see all I need to do at this point is just add the case and any other information that you might need to. It's automatically grabbed the subject line and mapped that across into the description field for you, so you don't need to do that, and it makes it easier for grouping up email conversations later on. So again, it's just a couple of clicks and you're ready to file that email away. So that's the first time that you ever file an email. So what Virtual Cabinet does to help you from that point on is it automates the process. So if we start that again, start with a blank email, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put in a recipient email address. So if I'm going to send this email to Gordon Gilchrist, for example, as soon as I do that, then Virtual Cabinet starts to learn upon itself. So it starts to use its AI in offering up suggestions. So it knows that you've done some filing before against this particular record, and it's now going, okay, so I know which one of these cases this belongs to, because there might be multiple cases there, and you just pick the case, and it fills it all in automatically for you. But crucially, there's a tick box here that says all future replies and forwards in this email conversation, ICAEW, will be automatically captured and filed on the file. So you've got that brilliant flexibility there that the system is basically asking for some human intelligence, so it's going in exactly the right place. But it's starting to learn upon itself as soon as you put that human intelligence in, offering up the suggestion for you, and then automatically filing and doing the drudgery of that filing process from that point onwards. Right the way through to if you're actually using something like IPS as your case management system, we have a direct integration, so the two software houses have worked very closely together so that if you're in any of the forms or you're doing any merging within IPS, you can simply go to the form, select what you want. So in this case, I've selected a statement of assets and liabilities, and if you want to file that document away, you can simply click the Save button in IPS, and it will know that you want this report saved into Virtual Cabinet. As you can see, a pop-up's just appeared there asking me if I want a copy in Virtual Cabinet. If I go ahead now and say yes, what it's doing is it's automatically grabbing the document, putting it into Virtual Cabinet, but also applying the relevant naming convention straight away into Virtual Cabinet so that a member of staff doesn't have to go through a tree structure, doesn't have to think about a naming convention, isn't going to drag and drop it in the wrong place by accident, and then it becomes a needle in the haystack to find it back.
And just for those of you that use IPS, that's not really artificial intelligence, that's more brute force intelligence. So there's the option now in IPS that you can put your own firm's filing reference as you use it in Virtual Cabinet against each document, standard document or report in IPS, so that you literally just have to press save. It already knows which case you're in, it knows where that document's going to go, and it just goes and puts it there.
Fantastic. And the last thing is, if you are in the case management system, we have several APIs. In this case, we've used one with IPS that you can simply click on Review Case Documents, and what that's going to do is that's going to evoke a Virtual Cabinet to bring back the file for that particular case for you. So as you can see there, I've clicked on that. There is no actual need to manually search for the file. Virtual Cabinet's just brought the whole case file back for you straight away. So in terms of adoption, which is the most important thing when you're looking at picking a document management system, is how easy is this going to be for a member of staff to be able to use a system. And if you're using a case management system, then with the integration that we have today is that they've simply got one button to press save, and it'll automatically save the document. Your emails are being automatically filed away for you, and to retrieve the file back, it's just one click of a button to get your documents back in a very logical format, because it's automatically labeled the documents in a convention that you wanted it in. So I think that gives you a nice representation of the sort of thing that you can achieve. Obviously, there's so much more to this, and I'd obviously recommend that you speak to Greg or Ted or any of your contemporaries, or of course come speak to us if you want to see this in more detail. But if I just now stop sharing my screen and go back to the slides, I think that probably leaves us a nice point to break off into any Q&A.
Could I just say something, David, before we do go into Q&A?
Sure.
One of the big things which helps us is to do investigations. That means that I can scan in. As you know, a lot of times when we write to banks, they still send us paper bank statements, etc. We can feed in 500 bank statements, and that will take about 4 or 5 minutes. Then at that point, we can search that for names, amounts, dates, everything, all within seconds. That also applies to other documents. So if we're doing the liquidation of a company and there's a certain file, we'll feed the whole file in, and then we search it for the things that we're looking for. And that is a massive help investigations.
Thanks, Ted. Thanks, everybody. We do have some questions that I'd like to pose as well. And just from my perspective, and Ted mentioned this earlier about him and his staff being able to work anywhere. When the poll was put up, nobody said that the biggest pain point was actually being able to work remotely. It took me an hour and 20 minutes to drive 13 miles to Leicester Station this morning, and I used to work directly opposite. For me personally, and I've heard other people say, if we didn't have the ability to work from home, it may not be so attractive to do so. If I'm not at your offices or indeed in a physical meeting somewhere else, I'm entirely remote, and it has to be therefore possible for me to do so. So we may find that there are people out there for whom actually it makes a difference as to whether they'd be interested in seeking employment in a particular organisation or not. As Ted also said, I'm not a techie bod at all, so some of these questions may also help others of you out there. The first one for David, I presume. Can I ask about the architecture and the hosting, please? Will Virtual Cabinet run in MS Azure? David?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and one we get asked a lot. So directly in terms of Microsoft Azure, yes, that's absolutely fine. Virtual Cabinet's a hybrid product, so it's both desktop and it has, as we discussed today, cloud client-facing portal, but Virtual Cabinet can reside in any type of environment, so whether that's on-premise or that you have your own private cloud, something like Azure, AWS, hosted desktop environment, Citrix, it works in all of those current environments. We've got many clients using Virtual Cabinet in all of those.
Great, and certainly it's been noticed amongst some of our audience that there appears to be an app for mobile devices for Virtual Cabinet, and people are wondering how that actually works, what it costs, and what it allows you to do whilst mobile.
Yeah, so that's a recent development for Virtual Cabinet. So there's a lot of talk around the cloud and has been for several years. And whilst we've obviously got our roadmap to have a full SaaS version of Virtual Cabinet in the cloud, there still seems to be a desire from different firms that they actually want to be in control of their data. They know that they can provide a private cloud environment and have those software applications hosted on those environments to give them the benefits of not having to do a backup and those sorts of things. But what they actually want is the ability to go mobile. So when they're out and about and they go and see one of their clients, they don't want to have to dial in via a VPN or a clunky remote desktop application. They simply just want to pick up their iPad, their laptop, their mobile phone and click an app and actually review the case file. So that's what we've built. So we've used everything that we've learned in terms of our technology development with our portal, and we've given our clients a very slick process where they can do a handshake with their app and their Virtual Cabinet license. So simply, if they're out and about and they have an internet connection, they can just log on via the app on their device, and in terms of the answer, in terms of what they can actually do, they'll be able to search the case file and bring up any documents that they've been looking at or need to look at. It brings up their most recent documents. So if you're already reviewing something on Virtual Cabinet from the office, the app will surface those first as a quick view. It allows for in-tray access. So if you are passing post around in Virtual Cabinet, you can receive your post on the app and be able to route things, see them and route them between yourselves. And our latest development is that if you are using any of our workflow modules, so if you, for example, need internal tasks to be approved, letters routed around the managers, for example, for approval, on the application itself, you'll be able to approve those documents to keep the routing going whilst you're out and about and out of the office.
And that's the bit we're most excited about, because being able to see the documents is obviously fantastic, but being able to approve them on the move is just going to be a great help for the office holders. Yeah. We can get in another way at the moment, but just on an app will be very straightforward.
Yeah, absolutely. There might not be a simple or single answer to this one, David, but how long does it take to implement?
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. It really does depend on the organisation that we're working with, but generally speaking, we've been doing this a very long time now. In fact, 20 years. I've been here for 10 of those, and it does depend. I mean, as Ted spoke about, you can take a big bang approach to this. We've done this so many times that as long as you've engaged your staff and culturally they've got an appetite to moving towards a digital office for the obvious reasons that we spoke about today, we can go into a firm and actually get them live from within sort of 2 or 3 days. Obviously there's some training that we do on site with the staff so that they're using the system straight away and they're up and running. As you can see, most of the time we're integrated to the actual applications they're using anyway, so the actual adoption curve is very, very easy. For larger firms, for example, we're working with Begbie's Trainer at the moment, where they've got a lot of staff, a lot of cases, and we can take our time in terms of the project management. We can do UAT environments, and then with a view to going live when the firm is ready, we can even roll that out, in small groups and go through the process. So the go live is over a couple of months, but everything is exactly in order so that it's a very successful rollout during the project.
And I think perhaps finally, given the time, David, you mentioned working with some bigger firms there, but equally it could apply to the smaller ones. Some of them don't just deal with insolvency, they have accountancy arms as well. And we've been asked, do you integrate with the accountancy software systems as well as others?
Yeah, it's a really good point because there's so many multi-discipline firms out there, and we've honed in, of course, on insolvency today, but when you're looking at a document management system, you want to make sure that they've got an integration to all of the applications that you're working in, so all of the staff get the same benefits that we've been talking about today. We work with almost 30% of the UK top 100s, and most of those have a financial services division, an accountancy division, an insolvency department, and we integrate with all of the different practice management, tax systems, financial advisor systems, as well as case management like you've seen with IPS today. So yeah, that is absolutely achievable, and again, it doesn't really matter what size firm you are, we can achieve the same thing.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much, and apologies to those of you if we didn't get time to answer your questions. We are going to follow up with those afterwards. So that does conclude the webinar, and I would like to express my extreme thanks to all three of our hosts today, David, Ted and Greg, for your insight and practical experience and advice. I've certainly found it quite insightful, and perhaps may not be able to be hoodwinked by some telling me what it can and can't do now. Thank you to you, our listeners, for your time and questions. I'd like to thank my colleague here, Maddie. I'm not a techie bod. Maddie's been helping on site today, so thank you for everything she's done prior to and during today. Thank you very much for your time today. Have a very good afternoon. Goodbye.